over its body other than the face itself.
There are, in fact, 4 different types of, what we think of as Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Very wide, pronounced nose. There was also a very ominous odor.
Phase 1 is to identify opportunities. I walked into a small clearing in less than 10-15 feet away from this enormous creature, and it scared the living hell out of me. Phase 2 is conducting investigations both of witnesses and locations. The size of the thing, it was 4 or 5 feet across the shoulders. Phase 3 is profiling research areas, what's there, how they move, feeding, things like that. About 8 feet tall, I guessed around 800 pounds. It was massive. I had no idea that anything like that existed. Phase 4 is create an intercept plan. I decided to shoot in the air to see if maybe it would scare it off. Phase 5 is the intercept and resolve the issue phase. It didn't do anything, it didn't react, and then I heard a noise from my right rear, and from out behind some brush come another one and walked over by the first one. That's when I decided to do what the dog did. I took off running. Welcome to Witness of the Unknown. Hello everyone. Welcome back to part 2 of Bigfoot in Idaho. I'm talking with Richard again. Richard, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well, Will. Thank you.
I can't remember exactly where we left off. I think it was you had just started really talking about all the different things that you've been finding and seeing there. So I'll let you go ahead and take over and, kind of tell us what's going on there.
Okay, thank you. I think last time I was talking about some of my experiences of the previous years, and I've got a couple that happened to me this summer that were pretty interesting. Well, one of them, the first one is I got my family together to go up to a reservoir. It's a local reservoir. It's not too far away. It's about 50 minutes away. And we were going to go fishing that day. So we made it to the reservoir, and I got everybody down to the dock and got all the poles all set up. And I decided that I'm going to go for a walk, because these guys, they love to fish, but I just, when I get out in the middle of some place like that, I just like to look around. It's just that Bigfoot researcher in me. So, and I've never looked around this place. I've hunted around it, but I've never really concentrated on looking for a sign. So I decided to take a walk, and there's a little road that skirts along the right side of the reservoir, and it's gated off. It's a Forest Service, one of those little big metal pole gates that block the road from cars. But occasionally you can see where somebody with a four-wheeler had gone around it. And so I started walking down that road, and I've failed to mention that there's a large campground right along that area too. So I got past the campground area and started walking, and I got about 100 yards down the road, and I looked up at the side of the hill on the right side, and I said, that looks like a good place to go in. So I climbed up, went up a slope. It took me up about 100 to 150 feet up off of the small access road, and I hit a bench. And this bench, it looked like there must have been an old logging road in there that had been overgrown over the years. Some trees have been pushed over it or have fallen. And I get up in there, and I see a structure right away. And I walk up to it, and I take some pictures, and it's one of those leaner structures where the trees are leaning up into like a little teepee formation. And the brush is pretty thick. So I check it out, and then I come back down to my little access road, and I start walking along it. And there's so many trees that were blown across it that I decided to get up on top of it and go along the ridge line up above it. So as I'm walking along this ridge line, I come up to a point that I'm beginning to hear noise to my right. And I know that there are cattle back in behind there, because there's the fence that runs along the backside of the camping area. And I have seen cows there when we've camped there before. So as I'm going along, the first thing in my mind was a cow. So I walk, I'm going along, and then I stop, and then the noise stopped. And I that's weird. And so I walked a little further, and then I stopped on purpose, and the noise took another step. And I thought to myself, nah, that's no cow. Cows don't do that. They would just crash through the brush, and that'd be the last you'd hear of them. But that noise on my right, I had a feeling that something was following me, and I didn't know whether it was a human or not. I hadn't heard anything that would distinguish that. So I kept walking, and I found a game trail, and I got up on top of it and started to walk back across the top of the game trail. It's just a slight elevation above that little road. And I heard my first knock, and it was far in the distance. And then I walked a little further, and I heard another knock, and this one was one to my right. So I started to go down that game trail, and then I found like a little like an indentation in the ground, but it was about 3 feet deep, and it had a whole bunch of little trees that were growing around it. It was pretty thick. So I walked back behind them and then just squatted down really quickly, and I wanted to see what was following me. So I got down inside there, and all of a sudden, the tree knocks, they started coming on, and over a period of 15 minutes, I counted 18 tree knocks. And the one that was the furthest away was moving in towards me. It was coming in on my left. And the one on the right, it was knocking also, but it was holding its position. So I'm squatted down inside this thing, this little, it's like a little blind-like thing. And I'm just listening, and finally, I decided to stand up. And when I stood up, that knock on my right was very close. It was like, okay, I see him. Boom, he hit it hard. And the other one, he kept moving in, and then he would hit a knock. And I saw, okay, so they're trying to triangulate me again, So, but on my backside, that there was a little slope down below me. That the trees were very sparse. They were here and there and here and there. It was not like that they could use them as good cover to come in behind me and get me in that triangle. So I walked down below the crest and moved up to my left, kept going, and I kind of screwed them up because they were trying to get me in that position, and when I moved to the left, they had to readjust themselves and trying to do it again, and it was pretty interesting. There was a lot of sounds in there, and when I stood up again, I heard the loudest knock that I've ever heard in my life, and it was within 20 feet on my right. He must have had a rock or something in his hand, but when he hit that tree, it sounded like a pistol shot, and I came off the ground. I jumped. It completely startled me, and I had a camera in my hand, and I turned, and I just started clicking a couple pictures. I don't know if I got anything on it, because I haven't really looked at them really close. Not like M.K. Davis can do, or somebody like that. And then the guy on the left side, he hit one. It wasn't as loud as the one on the right, but he hit the one. It was about 25 to 30 feet to my left, and I think he was just letting the other guy know that he was right there too. Mm-hmm. And when he did that, I wheeled to my left and took a couple quick pics that way. And at that point, they were real close. and I didn't know what they were going to do. I had no idea what their intentions. I don't know, because I've never been in that area, and I wasn't expecting them to really be in that area. But boy, there they were, and they were in tight. So I have a Salish saying that I use when I enter the woods, and I suspect that they're there. I spoke that out, and it basically means friendly encounter in Salish. And I spoke that out, and things stopped. But I also said the word fish. And as soon as I said the word fish, everything went silent, just completely quiet. And I was a member of the Bigfoot Outlaws for quite a while. And Jim King told me that if there's ever a situation that comes up, do something odd, and that'll usually blow their mind and make them back off, because there's that level of uncertainty in their minds now. And I've never said that word fish, but as soon as I said it, it was just like somebody hit a switch. All the sounds, everything went down. I mean, it was shut off, and it was one of the strangest situations that I've ever been in. It was probably the closest they've ever been to me in that many numbers, at least two. I'm suspecting there were more back in there, but I know that at least two were there.
Right.
But they were close. They were within 20, 30 feet, but I used one of his little tips, and by God, it worked. It shut them down.
What my sources, my government sources, tell me that what you did actually, and this is something they've proven, is by talking out loud, it does throw them off. But what it is they don't know how many people are there. They think you're talking to other people.
Yeah.
So if they think more people are there, that it's a numbers game. It'll throw them off.
Sure. And as stealthy as I was trying to be to them, they had no idea how many people were with me.
Exactly.
They didn't know I was alone. Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Boy, but it. At one time I had gifted them a fish, but that was 3 or 4 miles in a different direction over by that tree. I had those bluegills with the spines on the back. Mm-hmm. I caught a couple of those, and I don't particularly like the fish, and so I decided just to put it by that tree and see if they took it. And then they did, or somebody did. It could have been a raccoon, I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, it could have been that. But when I said that it just shut them down. I was just totally amazed. Mm-hmm. And that's a good place for them to live too. That reservoir, it has it's got bass in it. It's got rainbow trout. It's got the bluegills. It's got gigantic snails that are like the size of baseballs. There's enormous snails. Oh yeah, and just think of that as a protein source. And those things are all lining all along the bank. As you walk along that reservoir, you can clearly see them in the water. They're not hard to get. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're huge, just giant snails. And there's turtles, lots of frogs. It's a great source of protein for them, especially during the summer when it's hot up here.
Sure.
Yeah. That's a good source. And the cattails at the very end of that. Oh my gosh, they must be 4 or 5 acres of cattails. And that's a good source of food too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see why a clan would want to leave that whole area. Other than because there's elk there, there's deer. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of animals in that area. Bears, quite a bit. So after I chased them down, I just I put my hands up in the air and I said the word brother, brother. And I don't know if they understand that. I have no clue, but I just decided to, I believe that back in the older days, the Indians and Bigfoot in the Northwest, there was some sort of a connection to them. They may have traded with each other. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I just have this weird feeling. The Indians talk about it a lot in some of their stories, that they trade food with them and berries for whatever reason. Maybe safe passage. I don't know. But that's what I just turned and walked back down the hill with my back to him because I wanted to show him that I wasn't afraid. And then when I got down to that access road and started to walk back toward my family, there's 2 girls that were coming down the road walking their dog. And I was just pumped up. It just happened. So I'm walking up to them, and they're walking by me, and I go, "Hey, how you doing?" And I go, "I just had an encounter." And they looked at me like, "What am I talking about?" And I said, I believe I just had an encounter with Sasquatch on the side of that hill. And one of the gals, she rolls her eyes. I mean, I got the eye roll right off the bat. And then the other gal, well, she was more interested in it, and she's like, "Oh, where? What? Really?" And she was more of a believer than the other one, and then she was the one that was walking her dog. And I said, "It's just right down there a little ways. By the way, I wouldn't let that dog run up on that ridge if I were you." And she laughed, and they went on their way. And I just like, I hope she heeds my word on that one. Mm-hmm. So I went back and went fishing with my family, and I told my wife what happened, and she was like, "Oh boy, on this side of the reservoir, huh?" And I go, "Yep, yeah, they're all the way over here too." So that's what happened with that one. It was probably the maybe the scariest one, because when he hit that tree with whatever he hit it with, it sounded like a pistol shot. Well, it scared me. I thought, it was really that close. I could feel the reverberation from the tree.
Yeah, we've got a recording of that same noise. Wow. Our people near Fort Lewis recorded that last year.
Cool. That is cool. Wow, I'd love to hear that. It was close, 20, 25 feet, just right on the. And what I really want to do, I want to do a follow-up in that area. Because when I got down to the bottom of the hill, I found a nice long stump, and I laid it down facing uphill where I just came from. Mm-hmm. So I can go back and find that spot, and I want to go up there, and I want to look for that tree. I want to see if I can't find bark missing or, marks on it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I've been, I've been thinking about that tree for quite a while ever since that happened, and I'm definitely going to go back in there after all the foliage has dropped off. I'm going to go look for it. It's not that hard to find, because I've got the pictures of the area from when I was snapping. I can just walk up there with my pictures and kind of line them up with the forest and see just right exactly where it was.
Right.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing that here pretty soon. Because deer season's open now, and there's a lot of people out in the woods.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I believe this clan, when it hears rifle shots, I'm thinking they're trucking right over there and waiting for that deer to get field stripped, and then they're going to clean that gut pile up.
Oh yeah, or grab the deer itself before the hunter gets there.
Yeah. I've heard people that have lost deer in that area. They didn't know what did it.
I've heard it quite a few times over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It really is, that they would be that brazen to go snatch that deer. I don't think they have any fear.
Other animals do it too. Grizzlies are getting to the point where they hear a gunshot from hunters, and it's becoming kind of a dangerous situation for hunters because they know that's a kill, and it's an easy meal for them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they're being habituated big time like that. Yeah, those animals aren't. Pardon me?
Oh, I was just going to say you had another experience this summer.
Yes, I did. My brother had come down from Alaska to visit us down here. He was planning on moving, but he just came down just to scout ahead before he made the move. And I was just, I didn't know which way Terry felt about Sasquatch, so I kind of brought up the subject. I go, "You want to go for a drive, and I'll show you some of my area where I've been Bigfoot researching?" And he was like, "Really?" But yeah. "You want to go for a drive?" And he goes, "Sure." So we hop in my truck and we drive up there where I work at, and we're going down the road. And I was going to show him some structures that were just unbelievable. beautiful things that are just that you know that a human couldn't have possibly done it. They're just impossible from the engineering standpoint. I call it the eye of the needle. It is this massive tree that stands straight up. It's out in the middle of this big clear cut on the side of this hill. One tree standing there alive, and it's got that tuning fork top that Sasquatch seems to like to play with, that little tuning fork top. And there's another tree, I think we measured it like 60 to 65 feet long, and its tip of it goes right through the middle of that tuning fork. And when you come back to the root of it, it's been imported because there's no roots and there's no hole anywhere near where that bottom of that tree is leaning through that tuning fork. It's a very impressive structure. I have quite a few pictures of it because whenever I go there, I take pictures of it just to see if anything is changed, like any broken limbs from maybe a smaller squatch running up it and then back down. I'm looking for any changes to those limbs. But I call that one the eye of the needle. And I brought Terry there, and we pull in, and there's cows all over the place. They're on that clear-cut hillside, and they're down on the right side where the main tree stands are. And then on the other side, there's a big meadow back in there. And we get out, and I walk up the hillside, and he kind of comes up that way with me, and I'm pointing out the particulars of that structure, and he's like, "Wow!" He's looking at it. I go, that sure doesn't look natural. That just doesn't seem that it could have fallen in there. And at that time, he has really good hearing. He has a lot better hearing than I do, and he heard this. I have come to term the moo roar, and there were cows there, and some of them were mooing, but off to kind of the left of us, we hear this massive moo roar, and it was, oh my God. He turns and looks at me and he goes, "What was that?" And I go, "What?" My mind was still looking at the structure, and I turned and looked and I go, "What'd you hear?" And he goes, "Well, just listen." And then a few seconds later, it moo roared again, moo roar. And the cows around us just started freaking out. They came running down that hill. And I'm looking at Terry and I go, "I think we need to go back towards the truck." So we kind of walked back down to the truck, and them cows were just streaming by us. They were coming from over the other side of the hill too. They came down, they all ran, they went right through that stand of trees, they ran right out into the middle of that meadow, and they clumped up into a large group. Craziest thing I've ever seen. That they were spooked. They were spooked bad by something.
Oh yeah.
And I walked up. Yeah, it was just nuts. And I looked at Terry and I go, "What the heck is going on?" And he was like, "God, I don't know, man." And then them cows, they all clumped up and they started mooing. Moo, moo. They were panicked. Mm. And I walked up to the truck and I reached in the back and I pulled out my old knocking stick that I had. And I go, "Well, if that sucker's roared like that, let's see what he does after I do this." And I walked up this tree and just hit that sucker as hard as I could. And that thing let off with 2 or 3 moo roars right in a row. Moo roar. And he did it, and just one right after the other. And I looked at Terry and I go, "Whoa, we need to get in the cab." So we walked over and climbed into the cab. We had our windows rolled down, and I'm looking around and I go, "Yeah, what do you think? You think we ought to drive on down the road? I know where there's another structure I want to show you." And he goes, "That was not a cow." He goes, "I've heard cows, and that was not a cow." And I go, yeah, that was definitely not a cow." So we drove on down the road, maybe another mile or so, and I pull over, and we get out, and I show him this really cool structure that they had made. It was like a 4-log asterisk. It was pretty cool. I got pictures of Terry standing in front of that. I go, hey, go walk over there, man, and I want to get a picture of you. And he goes over there and he turns around, he stands by it, and I get some pictures. And then he walks down to me and he goes, did you just hear that? And I go, what? And he goes right across the road and then out into there's the trees are thick. It goes all along that road. And he goes, I just heard something running through those trees right there. And it was on two legs. And I go, are you sure? And he goes, yeah. That was no cow down there either, or a deer. I heard something running. And I go, I'll bet that son of a gun followed us down here. And we looked at each other and go, let's get in the truck and get out of here. So we got in the truck because I didn't have a gun. It was we went in there unarmed. So we hopped in the truck and drove off. And all the way back, we were talking about that, how the cows were reacting, the moo roar, and him following us from that spot all the way down. I'm wondering if he was just kind of escorting us out of the area just to make sure we were going to leave.
It's very possible.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's, and I believe it was only one. I think that was the alpha, and the rest of the family group was hanging out over at the reservoir, and this alpha was quite a ways away. It was probably 3 miles as the crow flies to that spot where he was. Mm-hmm. They wander around a lot, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
The alphas do, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. He was off on his own doing something, because I don't believe there was another one with him. I didn't hear anything, and I didn't hear any knocks, any locator knocks or anything like that. That he's
and you may not if the alpha is issuing a challenge, the other ones will be quiet.
Ah, That's yeah.
That may have been that may have been the signal to get out.
We did. we read him loud and clear. I've never heard that moo roar before. Never have. It was a different kind of a roar. It wasn't the T-Rex roar. It was something completely different.
I've heard a lot of different noises from these things, and some of them never twice.
Yeah, that was that was something out. The rock clacking. I've heard rock clacking one really good time. I'd come into that area again, and I went to the left of the road, and was wandering around through the woods, just seeing if there's anything new. And I come up onto this spot that was starting to drop down the backside of the slope, and the clacking just took off, and it was like clack 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 clack. And then I heard a knock on my left side, and then a knock on my right side. And I started to go, okay, I hear you guys. Okay, I just turned around and backed right out. That was the first time I ever heard real rock clacking together as the rocks on rocks, and that was pretty interesting, because they use rocks to communicate. They use wood knocking, bird calls, all kinds of different ways of communication. Right. That the if somebody wasn't really listening for it, they might just put it off as a woodpecker or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people just ignore what noises they hear out there.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're just, their head is in the clouds. They're happy to be out in the woods. They don't really understand that Sasquatch is in the woods, and some of these sounds that they make, it just goes right over their heads.
Right. Did you have a chance to go out in the field yesterday? You mentioned you were going to go out and take a look.
Yeah. Yes, I did. I drove up there, and I stopped at the tree to pick up a few apples, because what I like to use is their apples to find out if they're in that area. I'll put them down underneath that one tree, and then I'll put a couple way up and off of some spikes, little knobs that stick out of a dead tree. I just stick a couple up there, just so that if it is by chance little animals, they're getting the ones on the bottom. Those are the ones up on the top. That'll tell me if they came through. So I like to do that just so that I can tell if they're in the area. I use their own food source sort of kind of like a not a communications, but sort of to figure out if they pass through.
Sure.
And I haven't been back yet. I'll go up there in a couple of days and see if they're gone. Because there's hunters that go down that road, and there's camps. Oh yeah, there's a lot of hunters down that road. And when I'm up there doing my research, I don't park right in my area. I park just outside of it and then walk back to it because I don't want anybody to stumble on me in what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah, I like to keep it on the down low. I don't want anyone to ruin it.
Yeah, no, I can understand that.
I put some down, and there was a light skiff, but I don't think that it's going to survive today's weather because it's pretty sunny out today. And
yeah.
I was hoping to come back and find some tracks, but I don't know if it's going to. I might be a little early on that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have a question for
Sure.
Mr. Black.
Sure.
I am interested. One of the things that I'm really interested in with Sasquatch is how do they keep their gene pool clean? How do they do that? Do they trade females? Do they have different clans and different troops? Do they come together in some informal truce and trade females?
Well, groups will bond together at times. There was one, the biggest group ever seen, and this is by my inside sources, not Mr. Black, a different set of sources. There were 35 individuals. I'm not sure how many groups that was. It was a number of them. But different groups have different rankings. In other words, one alpha is going to be a little bit more dominant than another one. So I've talked to people and have heard two different groups pass in the night, and it's almost like the way it was described. There was a lot of vocalizations by all the individuals in each group, and this happens with chimps and other monkeys as well.
I've studied that.
Until one of the alphas issued a challenge and was answered by the other one, and then there was no noise whatsoever. The two groups, as dominance was established, the two groups passed without incident, and that was the end of the incident.
I think that they do try and avoid from harming each other because once you get hurt out there, it's there's no hospitals for them, and
right, and that's the whole point of the dominance thing,
Yeah.
But I'll ask you about
also,
that.
Yeah. Mainly, I'm starting to think that they're trading females in some way.
Members
or they're stealing them.
Members will break away from groups. And I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
In Southern Washington, there are three groups. Two that are probably what you would call a family group. And there's the third group is basically three males. And sometimes one of those males will join one of the other groups, and then they go back. Two of the individuals in that particular group, two of the males, I've seen one of them, the big gray one, and a group of road workers I interviewed saw the other one. That's probably the offspring of the gray one because they're about the same size and build. The only difference is one is brown, the other one's gray. I mean, I'm guessing, of course, but just based on size and tracks they've seen in the area. So that's the dynamic of that area. Whether that's the pattern everywhere, I don't know. But there's enough of them around, enough groups. I'm sure, members leave and make other groups and do all sorts of things. I mean, it happens the same with other primate species, so it's probably very similar to what other primates do.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, because I've been studying chimps now for, some of their behaviors for a little over a year, and how they acquire females, and a lot of it is in raiding parties.
Sometimes, and humans used to do the same thing, and still do in some
Exactly,
places.
Yeah. Yes, they do. Yeah, yeah. And that's why I'm thinking because chimpanzees have a sort of a gene in their composite that doesn't allow them to interbreed, and I'm just thinking maybe that's what Sasquatch has too. But then when the density is lower, and they may have to interbreed with cousins or something, it might happen, and that's where I believe the different types of Sasquatch come out. The type 3s, like with the snouts, and maybe they've been.
Actually, it's by region. I mean, it's if you look at humans around the world, we're not all exactly the same. There's a lot of subgroups, and a lot of that has to do with developing away from other groups.
Yeah.
And it's not so much
you get those closed breeding groups.
Right now, there are some. We do see some with, and so I got this from Mr. Black, and I'm going to be interviewing him, so we'll get a lot of this information out when we do the interview. But he was telling me recently about places where you see, or people say they find three-toed tracks and things like that. That's a breeding problem in that group where those develop. So but in most areas, especially in the West, there's a lot of these things, a lot more than people think there are. So they're very actively breeding, and their population is growing.
Yeah, I believe the Northwest is. That's why they have more round heads in the Northwest than they have the conical heads.
Those are actually two different types.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I was going to do an overlay of the United States, and from eyewitness reports of where the different types have been located, and try and get to see just exactly where in certain sections of the United States maybe they have those closed groups that produce the baboon snouts.
Well, I can tell you where those areas are. I know I know where all these places are. Actually, I'm going to be putting that out in a book when I discussing the four types, and Mr. Black said,
good.
He's going to help me with that.
Well, it looks like I was on the right path there.
yeah. Well, it'll help everyone when I get the book done and get it out. So
I'd love to read that. Yeah.
I'll be sure to bring you a copy. I'm definitely going to come and visit you at some point. So probably.
I would really love it if you could come here. There's no big climbing. Most of it's flat. There's some small little rises, nothing heavy, and it just seems to be. They're just loaded around here, and I'm not sure how big the clans are.
It'll probably be next summer when the weather's a little better and we can get out there and maybe spend a little time there. But I think we're heading into kind of a bad time of year, but that's okay. I mean, they're not going anyplace, so.
Because I took a county map that I got at the U of I and had it put the plastic over it, and whenever I found a footprint, I would draw an arrow in which direction that footprint was walking. And I looked at it, and I started drawing lines, and whenever those lines were intersecting, that's when I was going into those areas and looking, and that's how I found my 22-inch track. It was in one of the intersections, and I just walked in there. I found a big double arch, and then that 22-inch track was about 10, 15 feet off to the left of it. I started doing those little trackways on my map, and that's one of my research methods that I use too. Right.
Well, very, very interesting. I mean, was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up, or?
I've been struggling with what they are, and I do believe that they're an ancient hominid to some degree. They, as far as I believe, and this is probably going to be controversial, but I believe that they were here before the First Nations people were here.
Oh, I've been saying that for a long time, and a lot of my Indian friends around the U.S. and Canada have confirmed that. They all say that they were here before their people came to the lands they came to settle in. And there was actually a lot of friction between them.
Yeah, and they have the advantage. They don't need fire. They don't need clothing. They have primitive tools. The the rocks and the sticks. The rocks can be used as communication or hunting devices. They really are, yeah.
Well, they're physically more adept than humans. The one problem is, and it's what makes us really where we got to be, is the fact that we're pack hunters. And it's virtually impossible to defeat a pack hunter. It doesn't matter how big and strong you are if you keep coming in numbers, and which goes back to when we talked about you talking out loud. When they think there are more humans around and they don't know how many, it really puts them off because that's a danger signal to them.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. They don't know what they're walking into, and they always seem to err in the side of safety.
Absolutely. And we are definitely aggressive and have been probably our entire history.
Yeah. But unfortunately, humans are the shoot first and ask questions later. That's what we do.
Well, fascinating, Richard. We'll definitely have to have you back, as things progress in your area there. Keep me posted of what's going on.
I sure will. Sure will. And
I'll stay in touch. I'm definitely coming to see you, so count on that.
I'm really looking forward to that. We can do a lot of really good work here. It's a very interesting place.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me, Will. I appreciate it.
I certainly appreciate it, my friend, and let's talk again soon.
Okay, we will. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you, my friend.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone, for joining me this week. Be sure to tune in again next week as we explore another account from a witness of the unknown.